Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping into a world where the color of your sleeve could get you killed, and the food you grew with your own hands was forbidden to touch your lips. We're traveling back to medieval Japan, a land of breathtaking beauty and rigid rules, where every detail of your life, from the sandals on your feet to the fish on your plate, was dictated by the class you were born into. It's a place of quiet gardens and strict hierarchies, and the rules that held it together are so extreme, so unthinkable now, that they feel almost like a strange shared dream. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these quiet journeys into history. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, settle into your blanket, and let's ease into tonight's story together. Imagine, if you will, waking up in a small village nestled between rice paddies and bamboo groves, sometime in the 14th or 15th century. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and wood smoke. You are a farmer, and the first thing you notice as you stretch is the rough, familiar feel of your cotton tunic. A simple garment, dyed a muted brown, or perhaps a faded indigo, the only colors the world allows you. The fabric is sturdy but coarse, softened by years of washing in the river. You might dream of silk, of a robe the color of autumn maples, or a sash as bright as a persimmon, but such things are not for you. In this world, the clothes on your back are a legal document, a public announcement of your place in the great chain of being. The sumptuary laws are as clear as the mountain streams. Peasants wear cotton or hemp, in dull, earthy tones. Bright colors and luxurious silk are reserved for the samurai and the nobility. If you, a farmer, were to somehow acquire a scrap of red silk and fashion it into a kimono, the consequences would be swift and absolute. You could be executed on the spot, your body left as a reminder that the order of the world is not to be questioned. The red dye, extracted from precious safflower, was a symbol of warrior spirit and high status, and your hands, calloused from the plough, had no right to wear it. Even a purple hair ribbon, a tiny flash of the imperial color, would bring the village headman to your door, and you'd be beaten and fined, the ribbon confiscated like a stolen jewel. Purple was the color of the gods and the shogun, a hue so sacred that your mere possession of it was a kind of sacrilege. Now, step out of that farmer's hut and walk along the narrow, muddy paths that weave between the rice paddies. You've spent months bent over, planting and tending the shoots, your back aching, your feet squelching in the muck. The rice you grow is a thing of beauty. When it ripens, the fields turn a brilliant, glossy white, each grain a tiny pearl. But here's the quiet tragedy of your life. You will never taste it. That gleaming white rice is not for you. It is reserved for the samurai class, the warriors who protect the land, and in theory you. Your own bowl is filled with millet, barley, or coarse brown rice, grains that stick to your ribs but never shine. If you were caught with a single bowl of that polished white rice, you could lose your land, your livelihood, your place in the village. The law was not a gentle suggestion, it was a blade. So, you grow the luxury, you harvest it, you hull it, and you hand it over, watching the ox carts trundle away toward the castle town, while your children chew on barley and dream of a taste they'll never know. Now, let's shift our gaze to a different kind of life, one that might seem, at first glance, a little luckier. Picture yourself as a merchant in a bustling post town along the Tokaido Road. You've done well for yourself. Your storehouse is full of goods, your coffers heavy with coins. You wear a fine kimono of silk, perhaps a subtle pattern of waves or geometric lines, and you've even managed to get permission to carry a short sword, a wakizashi, tucked discreetly inside your robes. But that sword must never be seen. If it peeks out, if a passing samurai catches a glint of metal at your hip, he could challenge you to a duel on the spot. And you, a merchant, have no real training. Your death would be legal, a mere footnote in the day's events. So you keep it hidden, a secret weight against your thigh, a constant reminder that your wealth means nothing against the warrior class. You are, in the official hierarchy, the lowest of the low, below farmers and artisans, because you produce nothing, only trade in the labor of others. And so, when you travel, You must walk barefoot, even in winter. Imagine the snow crunching under your soles, the cold biting into your toes, while a teenage samurai, barely old enough to grow a wisp of a mustache, rides past on a horse. He doesn't even glance at you, and you must step off the road, kneel in the snow, and bow your head, thanking him for the privilege of his passing. Your feet are numb, your knees soaked, but you murmur your gratitude, because to do otherwise would be an insult punishable by death. The oiled paper umbrella you carry, a beautiful thing of waxed paper and bamboo ribs, painted with a delicate design, is one of your few permitted luxuries, a status symbol that marks you as a man of means, even as you kneel in the slush. A common farmer would have only a straw hat and a raincoat, getting soaked to the bone, while you at least can keep the snow off your silks. But the umbrella is a fragile shield against the deeper humiliation. Let's wander now into the world of the samurai themselves. For even within the warrior class, the rules were a tight web. Inheritance followed a strict primogeniture. Only the eldest son received the family estate, the land, the stipend, the ancestral sword. If you were born second or third, your fate was a quiet kind of erasure. You'd get nothing but a bowl and a prayer bead, as the saying went, and you'd have to beg your older brother for a job in the stables, or drift away to a monastery, or become a ronin, a masterless samurai, wandering the roads with an empty stomach and a sword you could barely afford to keep sharp. Picture the younger son, standing in the courtyard of his family home, watching his brother inherit everything. The air smells of pine and old wood. He holds a simple lacquered bowl, a parting gift, and a single prayer bead, and he knows that his future is a blank scroll. He might become a landless retainer, living in a tiny room in his brother's house, eating leftovers, his only purpose to serve. Or he might take the tonsure and join a monastery, where the rules of class were replaced by the rules of the abbot. But at least he would have a roof and a bowl of rice. Brown, of course, for monks were humble. The sadness of it was not a loud grief. Samurai were forbidden from showing public emotion. If your lord died, you'd have to weep silently into your sleeve, because a single tear on your cheek could cost you your position and your sword. The stoicism was a kind of armor, but it must have been a heavy one to wear. Now, let's turn to something as simple as a bath, because even the frequency with which you washed your body was a matter of class. In the farmhouse, a bath was a rare event, perhaps once a week, or even less, a wooden tub filled with water heated over a fire, shared by the whole family. The water would be cloudy with the day's labor, but it was a moment of warmth and relief. In the samurai household, bathing was more frequent, a ritual of purification, the steam rising in a small, cedar-scented room. And in the shogun's palace, of course, the baths were elaborate, the water scented with herbs. But for the merchant, despite his wealth, the rules of modesty and class might limit his access to the public bathhouses, or dictate the hours he could attend. The body, like the clothes, was a canvas for the social order, and what of the food that graced the tables? The sea bream, with its proud arched back and happy red face, was a fish of celebration, a symbol of good fortune. But if you were a commoner, a fisherman, and you hauled one in your net, you had to throw it back. That fish was meant only for the shogun's table, or perhaps for a high-ranking samurai lord. Its flesh was said to be delicate and sweet, but you would never know. You'd watch it flip and gasp on the deck, and then you'd gently return it to the waves, while your children, hungry and curious, asked why. The black market, of course, existed. A whispered transaction in the dead of night, a secret feast in a back room, but the risk was enormous. A single scale found in your possession could bring the authorities to your door. Even the ground beneath your feet was regulated. The straw sandals or waraji that you wore as a farmer or a traveling merchant were woven from rice straw, and they wore out every few miles. You'd carry spares, or stop to weave new ones by the roadside, your fingers working automatically as you watched the road for approaching samurai. The sandals of a samurai were sturdier, often with leather soles, and they announced his step with a crisp, authoritative sound. The sound of straw sandals was a soft whisper, a sound of impermanence, of things that crumbled and were remade, much like the lives of those who wore them. So, as you drift deeper into this world, picture the great chain of being as a vast, invisible ladder with the emperor and shogun at the top, the samurai below, then the farmers, the artisans, and finally the merchants at the very bottom. Every rung was fixed, and the space between them was patrolled by laws that reached into the smallest corners of daily life. The color of your umbrella, the grain in your bowl, the sword at your side or its absence. All of it was a language, a constant, quiet conversation about who you were and where you belonged. And the strangest thing, perhaps, is that for centuries, this order held. It was not always peaceful and it was never fair, but it was understood. The rules that nobody would tolerate now were back then simply the way the world was made, as natural as the turning of the seasons or the flow of the river. And as you settle into your blanket, you might feel a small, quiet gratitude for the soft, unregulated comfort of your own bed, where no one can tell you what color to wear, or what to eat, or how to walk. The night is still, and the rules of that old world have faded into the mists of history, leaving only these gentle echoes, like the distant sound of straw sandals on a snowy road. Now, if you were born into the samurai class, the rules were different, but no less strict. In fact, they were carved into your life from the moment you could walk, and the sword was always at the center of it all, not just as a weapon, but as a kind of second soul, a mirror of your honor. Picture a small boy, about 7 years old, standing in the doorway of his family home for the last time. He is dressed in a stiff new kimono, the fabric still smelling faintly of the indigo dye, and his mother kneels behind him, her hands folded in her lap, her face perfectly still. She will not cry, because a samurai woman does not show such weakness, but the boy can feel the warmth of her gaze on the back of his neck, like the last rays of a setting sun. He is not supposed to turn around. He has already said his formal goodbye, bowing low with his tiny hands on the tatami, and now he must walk out to meet the stern uncle or the fencing master who will raise him from this day forward. That was the custom. At 7, a samurai boy left his mother's world forever, stepping into a realm of cold floors, early mornings, and the constant, unyielding presence of the sword. You can almost hear the silence of that new house. The way the wooden corridors seemed to swallow every sound except the sharp clack of the master's sandals. The boy would sleep in a small, bare room and under his pillow. Not a soft pillow, but a wooden block wrapped in cloth. He would place a wooden practice sword, a bokken. The idea was that even in sleep, the sword was his companion, a reminder that a samurai must be ready to defend his honor at any moment, even in dreams. The wood was smooth from years of use, polished by the hands of other boys who had come before, and it carried a faint, clean scent of cedar. If the boy rolled over in the night, and the sword clattered to the floor, he would wake instantly, heart pounding, and the master might not say anything the next morning, but the look in his eyes would be enough. A quiet disappointment that was heavier than any shout. Dawn came early, and with it, the training. Imagine standing in a courtyard in the middle of winter, your breath puffing out in little clouds, your bare feet numb on the frozen ground. The snow had been swept into neat piles at the edges, but the stones were still slick with ice, and the cold crept up through your legs like a slow, patient tide. The master would hand you a real sword for the first time. Not a full-size katana, but a shorter blade, still heavy enough to make your arms tremble. You would practice the same cut, over and over, 100 times, 1,000 times, until the motion became as natural as breathing. The blade would hiss through the air, a sound like tearing silk, and the master would correct your grip with a light tap of his fan on your wrist. There was no shouting, no harsh words. The discipline was all in the repetition, the quiet expectation that you would push through the pain because a samurai did not complain. Hunger was part of the training too. Meals were simple, a bowl of rice, a bit of pickled plum, maybe a piece of dried fish. And you learned to eat slowly, to savor each grain, because a samurai must master his desires, even the desire for food. By the time the boy reached adolescence, his hair had grown long enough to be gathered into the topknot, the shomage, which was far more than a hairstyle. It was, in a very real sense, the seat of his soul. The top of the head was considered the most sacred part of the body, the place where the spirit entered and departed, and the topknot was its guardian. Having it cut off by an enemy was a fate worse than death. It meant you had been utterly defeated, stripped of your identity, and you would be shunned by your family, your friends, your entire world. A samurai whose top knot was snipped off while he slept would wake to a shame so profound that he might never show his face in public again. His wife would leave him, his children would hide in embarrassment, and he would likely take his own life rather than endure the disgrace. You can picture the careful ritual of tying it each morning. The way the hair was oiled and pulled back, folded over itself into a neat, glossy knot that sat on the crown like a dark, polished stone. It was a mark of your status, visible from across a crowded street, and it told everyone who saw it that you were a man of honor, a man who carried a sword and the right to use it. That right was absolute, and it is here that the rules of medieval Japan take a turn that would be unthinkable today. A samurai was permitted by law to cut down a commoner on the spot for any perceived disrespect. This was called kirisute gomen, literally cut and leave, and it meant that if a farmer or a merchant failed to bow low enough, or used a word that could be taken as insolent, the samurai could draw his sword and strike him down without any legal consequence. Imagine walking along a dusty road, your straw sandals crunching on the gravel, and you see a samurai approaching on horseback. You know you must kneel, press your forehead to the dirt, and wait until he passes. If you're a second too slow, if your bow is a fraction too shallow, you might feel a sudden, cold wind, and then nothing at all. The samurai would simply wipe his blade on a cloth, sheathe it, and ride on, and no one would dare say a word. The body would be left where it fell, a silent reminder of the order of things. There was an even darker practice, one that was technically an abuse of the privilege, but was rarely punished. It was called tsujigiri, which means crossroads killing. A samurai who had acquired a new sword, a blade he had saved for, or one that had been passed down through his family, might want to test its sharpness on a living target. So he would wait at a crossroads at night, where the roads were empty, and the moonlight cast long, silver shadows, and he would strike down the first person who came along. Often it was a beggar, a traveling merchant, or a farmer walking home late. The samurai needed to know if the blade could cut through a human body in a single clean stroke from shoulder to opposite hip, and the only way to be sure was to try. You can almost hear the silence of that moment, the soft pad of footsteps on the dirt, the sudden, sharp intake of breath, and then the whisper of the sword as it left its scabbard. The victim would have no time to scream, and the samurai would examine the cut, note the way the blade had performed, and then disappear into the darkness. It was a cold, clinical act, treated almost like a craftsman testing a new tool, and the law turned a blind eye because the samurai's sword was in a sense above the law. Of course, a samurai's life was not all about cutting down commoners. There were gentler privileges too, and one of the most beautiful was falconry. A samurai might carry a hawk on his wrist, the bird's talons gripping a thick leather glove, its hooded head turning this way and that with quick, sharp movements. The hawk was a living jewel, its feathers a mosaic of browns and creams, its eyes like polished amber. Training a hawk took years of patience, and the bond between the bird and its master was a quiet, wordless thing, built on trust and the promise of fresh meat. But this privilege was guarded with the same ferocity as the right to carry a sword. If a peasant so much as disturbed a falcon's nest, or accidentally scared a hunting hawk away, he could be executed. His head might be displayed on a spike at the village gate, a warning to everyone that the samurai's pleasures were not to be trifled with. You can imagine the hawk sitting on its perch in the garden, preening its feathers, while the samurai watched with a calm, possessive pride, knowing that this creature was a symbol of his place in the world, as untouchable as the sword at his side. And yet, for all this power, the samurai lived under a code that demanded the ultimate sacrifice for failure. The word for it was seppuku, ritual suicide by disembowelment, and it was the expected end for a samurai who had disgraced his lord, lost a battle, or committed some unforgivable error. The ritual was not a desperate, spur-of-the-moment act. It was a carefully choreographed ceremony, witnessed by friends and officials, and it was considered the highest expression of honor. Picture a quiet courtyard, the ground covered in white sand, a single white mat laid out in the center. The samurai, dressed in a white kimono, would kneel on the mat, his legs folded beneath him, his face calm. In front of him would be a short sword, the blade wrapped in paper, so that only a few inches of steel were exposed. Behind him would stand his kaishaku, his best friend, or a trusted comrade, holding a long sword, ready to deliver the final, merciful cut. The samurai would take the short sword in both hands, and then, with a single, deliberate motion, he would drive it into the left side of his belly and draw it across to the right. The pain was unimaginable, a white-hot fire that tore through his body, but he was not allowed to cry out, not allowed to flinch. His face had to remain composed, a mask of serene acceptance, because to show agony was to lose honor in his final moment. And then, just as the pain became unbearable, the kaishaku would bring his sword down in a swift, clean arc, severing the samurai's head from his body in a single stroke, ending the suffering. The head would fall forward, and the body would slump, and the witnesses would bow, their faces expressionless because to show emotion was forbidden. A samurai was not supposed to weep, not even for his dearest friend. Public emotion was a weakness, a crack in the armor of self-control, and it was trained out of you from childhood. You learned to keep your face as still as a pond on a windless day, no matter what storms raged inside. This restraint extended to every part of life. A samurai did not laugh too loudly, did not cry, did not show anger in a way that disrupted the surface of things. His voice was measured, his movements deliberate, his gaze steady. Even in the privacy of his own home, he was expected to maintain this composure because the walls had ears and the servants were always watching. You can imagine the effort it took, the constant, quiet pressure of holding everything in, like a dam holding back a river. And when the dam finally broke, it broke in the form of seppuku, a final, violent release that was also, paradoxically, the ultimate act of control. The sword, then, was everything. It was the instrument of death, the symbol of honor, the companion that slept under your pillow and hung at your side, and, in the end, was turned against your own body. It was forged by master craftsmen who folded the steel over and over, creating a blade that was both flexible and razor-sharp, with a wavy line along the edge that looked like the pattern of wind on sand. A samurai would spend hours caring for his sword, oiling the blade, checking for the tiniest fleck of rusts, because a neglected sword was a neglected soul. And when he walked through the streets, the two swords tucked into his belt, the long katana and the shorter wakizashi, announced his status to everyone he passed. The commoners would step aside, bowing low, their eyes fixed on the ground, because to meet a samurai's gaze was to invite disaster. It is hard, from the soft comfort of your bed, to imagine living in a world where a single misstep could cost you your life, where your very soul was tied up in a knot of hair on top of your head, where a friend's greatest act of love was to cut off your head while you bled. But for the samurai, these were not cruelties. They were the natural shape of existence, as inevitable as the cherry blossoms falling in the spring. The rules that nobody would tolerate now were, to them, the very definition of a meaningful life. A life lived so close to death that every breath was precious, every gesture weighted with significance. And as you drift deeper into the quiet of the night, you might feel a gentle gratitude for the soft, forgiving world you inhabit, where a bad day does not require you to take a blade to your own belly, and where your honor is not measured by the sharpness of your sword. The samurai's world has faded, like ink on old paper, leaving only these stories, these echoes of a time when the sword was the soul, and the soul was a thing of terrible, beautiful fragility. Imagine, if you will, that you are a woman of the samurai class in medieval Japan, perhaps during the Kamakura or Muromachi period, somewhere between the 12th and 16th centuries. The world you inhabit is one of exquisite beauty and rigid, invisible rules. Rules that shape your body, your voice, your very presence in ways that might seem, to a modern listener, almost unimaginable. But to you, they are simply the texture of daily life, as natural as breathing, as inevitable as the turning of the seasons. And so, as you drift deeper into the quiet of the night, let us step softly into that world and see it through your eyes. Picture yourself on a cool morning, the light filtering through the paper screens of your room, soft and diffuse as powdered rice. You rise from your futon, and the first thing you do, before you even think of food or dressing, is to tend to your hair. Your hair is your glory, a long, dark river that falls past your waist, almost to the floor when you stand. It is washed not with harsh soaps, but with water left over from rinsing rice. A cloudy, faintly sweet liquid that you save carefully in a wooden bucket. You can almost smell it now, that gentle, starchy scent, as you pour it over your head, working it through the strands with your fingers. The rice water makes your hair gleam like polished lacquer, and you know that a woman's beauty is measured, in part, by the length and luster of her hair. You comb it out slowly, patiently, 100 strokes, until it lies smooth and heavy down your back, a dark waterfall that catches the morning light. Now, as you sit before your bronze mirror, its surface slightly warped and mysterious, you prepare for the first of the day's transformations. Your face is pale, whitened with a powder made from rice flour, and against this blank canvas, you will paint a new face. You take a small, sharp knife, and with practiced care, you shave away your natural eyebrows. The sensation is not painful, merely a faint scraping, a gentle tug. You have done this so many times that it feels as ordinary as brushing your teeth. Once the skin is smooth, you reach for your ink stick and grind it on the stone, mixing the black powder with a little water until it becomes a glossy paste. Then, with a fine brush, you paint 2 delicate smudges high on your forehead, just below the hairline. Soft, moth-like shapes that give your face a dreamy, otherworldly look. This is hikimayu, the art of the painted brow. To your eyes, it is the height of elegance. A woman who leaves her natural eyebrows unshaven, dark and low above her eyes, seems coarse, almost animalistic, a peasant perhaps, who works in the fields and has no time for refinement. You would never be seen without your painted brows, for they are a mark of your status, your civility, your very humanity. And then the smile. You lean close to the mirror and you open your mouth. Your teeth are not white, not pearly, but a deep, lustrous black, as if you had been drinking ink. This is oaguro, the practice of blackening the teeth, and to you it is the most beautiful thing in the world. The mixture is simple but potent. Iron filings soaked in vinegar, sometimes with a little tea or sake added, left to rust into a dark, pungent liquid. Every few days you carefully paint this liquid onto your teeth, letting it stain the enamel until it gleams like black lacquer. The taste is metallic and sour, and it takes time to get used to. But you would never dream of smiling with white teeth. White teeth, to your mind, are barbaric, like the fangs of a wild animal. Black teeth, on the other hand, are a sign of maturity, of fidelity, of a woman who has left the follies of girlhood behind. When you smile, you do so with your lips closed, or you raise a hand to cover your mouth, because to show your teeth, even blackened ones, is considered as immodest as exposing your bare skin. A wide, open-mouthed laugh would be a scandal, something your mother-in-law would never forgive, and so you giggle behind your hand, a soft muffled sound, your eyes crinkling above your fingers, and everyone understands that you are a woman of breeding and grace. Now, as you move through your day, you must also move through your language with the same care you give to your appearance. You speak a secret tongue, a women's language called Nyobo Kotoba, which means court ladies' words. It is a language of euphemism and indirection, where nothing is named directly, because directness is considered too harsh for delicate ears. You never say you are hungry. Instead, you murmur that your stomach is thin. You do not ask for water, you ask for the cold thing. Rice becomes soft grains. Tofu is the white square, and a fish is the thing that swims. Even the simplest objects are wrapped in layers of polite circumlocution, as if the world itself were too raw, too real, to be spoken of plainly. You learn this language as a girl, from your mother and your aunts, and it is as natural to you as breathing. But sometimes, in the quiet of your own mind, you might wonder what it would be like to say exactly what you mean, to call a bowl, and not a round container for holding things. But you would never speak such a thought aloud, for a woman's voice is a delicate instrument, and it must never be used to pierce the harmony of the household. And speaking of the household, there is another rule that hangs over your life, as silent and as heavy as a winter cloud. Your husband, if you are married, holds a power that is both simple and absolute. He can divorce you with a letter of just 3.5 lines. Imagine coming home from the market. basket on your arm, the smell of pickled plums still on your fingers, and finding a folded piece of paper on the floor of the entrance hall. You pick it up, and your heart sinks, because you recognize the brushwork. The letter is brief, almost curt. It does not need to give a reason, but if it does, it might say that you talk too much, or that you have shown jealousy, or that you have failed to bear a son. Perhaps it mentions a minor illness, a persistent cough, a slight limp, anything that might be seen as a flaw. And that is it. The marriage is over. You are expected to leave, and you will likely never see your children again, for they belong to your husband's family. The 3.5-line letter is a door that closes behind you, and there is no appeal, no court to hear your case. It is simply the way of the world, and you have always known it, even as a child playing with dolls. But there are other, more intimate rules that govern your body, rules that speak to a deep and ancient belief in purity and pollution. Once a month, when your body enters its cycle of renewal, you are considered ritually impure. Your very presence, it is said, can offend the gods, can blight the rice fields, can bring misfortune to the household. And so, you gather a few belongings, a thin blanket, a change of clothes, perhaps a small bowl of rice, and you walk to the edge of the village, to a tiny cold hut called a betsuya. It is a simple structure, barely more than a shed, with a dirt floor and a thatched roof that leaks when it rains. There is no brazier for warmth, no soft futon, no company. You will stay there for the duration of your bleeding, alone with the sound of the wind and the distant barking of dogs. The nights are long and the cold seeps into your bones, but you do not complain, because this is simply the way things are. You are unclean, and you must be kept apart, lest your impurity spread like a stain. When your time is over, you will wash yourself in the river, and then you will return to the house, as if nothing had happened, and no one will speak of it. And if you are with child, there is a whole new set of rules to follow, a map of taboos that will guide every bite you take. You must not eat crab, for it is said to make the baby's fingers crooked. You must avoid squid, because its rubbery texture might cause a difficult labor. Certain fish are forbidden, certain vegetables, certain fruits. The list is long and intricate, passed down from mother to daughter, and you follow it with the devotion of a priestess. Because the health of your child depends on your obedience. You eat only what is safe, what is pure, what will shape your baby into a strong and beautiful being. And all the while you move through the house with a quiet grace, your hand often resting on your belly, your thoughts turned inward to the secret life growing within you. But there is one more rule, the most solemn of all, and it is reserved for the wives of samurai. It is a rule that speaks of honor and duty, of a love so fierce that it transcends life itself. If your husband is disgraced, if he is defeated in battle or condemned by his lord, you may be called upon to perform jigai, the ritual suicide of a samurai wife. It is not the seppuku of men, with its elaborate ceremony and its second, to strike off the head. Jigai is a quieter, more private act. You will dress in pure white, the color of death, and you will kneel on a cushion, your legs bound together with a silk cord, so that even in death you will not fall in an immodest posture. You will take a small knife, a kaiken, which you have carried since your wedding day, a gift from your mother, and you will cut your own throat, a single, swift stroke across the carotid artery. It is a terrible thing to imagine, and yet, to the samurai wife, it is the ultimate expression of loyalty and love. It is a way of saying that your honor is bound to his, that you will not live in a world where he is shamed. You have known this since you were a girl, and you have made your peace with it, as a flower makes its peace with the frost. All of these rules, these invisible threads that bind your body and your speech and your very existence, might seem, to an outsider, like a prison. But to you, they are the architecture of a meaningful life. They give shape to your days. They connect you to your ancestors. They make you part of something larger than yourself. When you paint your brows high on your forehead, you are not just adorning your face. You are participating in a tradition that stretches back centuries, a tradition that says, I am a woman of culture, of refinement, of grace. When you speak in the soft, indirect language of Nyobo Kotoba, you are not just avoiding harsh words. You are creating a world of gentleness and harmony. a world where even the simplest objects are treated with reverence. When you cover your mouth to laugh, you are not just hiding your teeth. You are showing that you understand the value of modesty, of restraint, of the delicate balance between self-expression and social order. And so, as you lie here in the darkness, wrapped in the warmth of your own bed, you might feel a gentle sense of connection to those long ago women who lived their lives within these invisible walls. Their world was not our world, and their rules were not our rules, but they were human, just as we are, with the same hopes and fears and quiet, unspoken dreams. They found beauty in blackened teeth and painted brows, in the soft rustle of silk and the gleam of rice-watered hair. They found meaning in the rituals that bound them, even as those rituals confined them. And perhaps, in the end, that is the most human thing of all, to take the rules we are given, and to make of them a life that is, in its own way, beautiful. Now, let your breathing slow, and let the images of that distant world fade, like the last notes of a koto string, vibrating softly into silence. The painted brows, the blackened teeth, the cold hut at the edge of the village. They are all just echoes now. Stories whispered across the centuries, growing fainter and fainter as you drift towards sleep. And here, in the soft, forgiving world of your own room, there are no 3.5-line letters waiting on the floor, no secret languages to learn, no ritual knives hidden in your sleeve. There is only the gentle rise and fall of your chest, the warmth of the blanket, and the quiet, steady rhythm of the night, carrying you gently, gently into dreams. Now let us step across the threshold of a medieval Japanese home and feel the quiet weight of all the invisible rules that turned every room into a kind of stage. Imagine you are coming in from the cold, your wooden sandals clacking on the packed earth of the entryway. The first thing you do, before you even lift your eyes to greet your host, is to slip off your sandals and place them with the toes pointing outward toward the door. This is not a casual habit. It is a tiny, deliberate performance of trust. You see, if you were to leave your sandals pointing inward, as if you were ready to snatch them up and flee, it would be a grave insult. It would whisper, without a single word, that you suspect this house might be a trap, that you expect to be murdered before the tea is even poured. So you kneel, and you turn the sandals just so, aligning them with the edge of the step, a silent promise that you feel safe here, that you are not planning a desperate escape. The gesture is so small, but it speaks volumes in a world where every object has a voice. Once your sandals are arranged, you step up onto the polished wooden floor of the genkan, the entrance hall, and you notice a pair of house slippers waiting for you. They are simple, made of woven straw or soft cloth, and you slide your feet into them with a sense of relief. But then, as you move deeper into the house, you encounter another pair of slippers, these ones kept just inside a tiny, separate room. The toilet. In the medieval Japanese home, the toilet was considered a place of spiritual pollution, a necessary but slightly unclean threshold between the human world and something else. And so, there were special toilet slippers, worn only in that one small space. You would step out of your house slippers, into the toilet slippers, do what you needed to do, and then, this was the crucial part. You had to remember to change back. If you forgot, if you walked out into the main rooms, still wearing those toilet slippers, you would be tracking that spiritual pollution all through the house, across the tatami mats, past the family altar, right into the heart of the home. Your grandmother, if you had one, would scold you for a week, her voice a low, insistent murmur about bad luck and disrespect. The slippers were a tiny, ridiculous detail, but they held the whole weight of the household's purity, and forgetting them was like leaving a mud footprint on the soul of the house. Now, once you had navigated the slipper situation, you might notice the floor itself. The tatami mats, soft and fragrant with the smell of woven rush grass, were not just a surface to walk on. They were a canvas for another kind of rule. The direction you swept them mattered. Imagine you are holding a bamboo broom, its bristles whispering against the straw. You do not simply push the dust out the nearest door. Instead, you sweep in a careful, inward-turning spiral, a pattern designed to trap good luck and keep it from escaping. The dust itself, the little bits of lint and fallen hair, had to be gathered and disposed of in the lucky direction of the day, which was determined by a complex zodiac calendar. If you swept it out the wrong door, On the wrong day, you might sweep away your family's fortune for the entire year. The broom became a kind of wand, and the act of cleaning was a quiet ritual, a way of coaxing prosperity to stay just a little longer. You can almost hear the soft, rhythmic sound of it, a gentle shushing that filled the room as the light slanted through the paper screens. Speaking of light, as the afternoon faded, the house would begin to smell of something savory and slightly smoky. The lamps were not electric, of course, nor were they filled with clean burning wax. They were simple dishes of fish oil or rapeseed oil, with a single wick floating on the surface. When you lit that wick, the whole room would fill with the scent of a fried dinner, a warm, greasy aroma that clung to the wooden beams and the paper walls. The flame would flicker, sending shadows dancing across the screens, and the light was never quite bright enough to read by, just a soft, golden glow that made the corners of the room seem deeper and more mysterious. For peasants, even this was a luxury. Many simply went to bed when the sun set, saving the oil for special occasions. But in a samurai household or a merchant's home, the fish oil lamp was the heart of the evening, a tiny, fragrant sun around which the family gathered. And how they gathered was another rule entirely. The family sleeping arrangement was a map of the household's hierarchy, a living diagram of who mattered most. Imagine the room at night, the futons unrolled on the tatami. The head of the household, the father or the eldest son, would sleep in the place of honor, often with his head pointing east or west. Never north, because north was how corpses were laid out for funerals. And to sleep with your head to the north was to invite death into your dreams. South was also avoided, leaving only those two safe directions. The wife would sleep nearby, but not in the same position of prominence. Children were arranged by age and gender, the eldest son closest to the father, the younger children farther away, and the smallest ones tucked into the corners. If there were elderly parents, they might have a special spot near the warmth. The whole family lay there like a human constellation, each body placed according to a silent, unspoken order that everyone understood from childhood. You would never dream of rolling over and sprawling into your brother's space, because that space wasn't just physical. It was a reflection of your place in the world. And then there was the warmth, or the lack of it. In winter, the house was a fragile shell of paper and wood, and the wind would rattle the screens like a persistent ghost. The only real heat came from the kotatsu, a low table with a thick quilt draped over it and a pit of warm ashes underneath. You would huddle there with your family, your feet buried in the soft grey ash, the heat seeping up through your legs, while the rest of the room remained bitterly cold. The snow would pile up outside, muffling the world, and you could hear the faint creak of bamboo in the garden, the occasional thump of snow sliding off a branch. Under that quilt, you might play a quiet game of Go, or tell stories, or simply sit in a drowsy, communal stupor, your breath misting in the air above the table. The kotatsu was the center of gravity for the entire household, a warm, smoky, slightly dusty cocoon, where the rules of rank relaxed just a little, because everyone's feet were equally cold before they went in. In the summer, the challenge was the opposite. How to create the illusion of coolness when the air was thick and humid, and the cicadas were screaming in the trees. The answer was a practice called uchimizu, sprinkling water on the veranda and the packed earth of the garden. You would take a wooden bucket and a small ladle, and you would scatter water in graceful arcs, watching it darken the stone and the ground. The evaporation would draw a tiny breath of coolness from the air, and the scent of wet earth would rise up, mingling with the smell of the tatami and the faint, sweet perfume of the incense burning inside. You would hang wind chimes, little glass or metal bells that tinkled in the slightest breeze, and you would listen to that sound, pretending it was a mountain stream or a cool wind from the sea. The humidity would still cling to your skin, of course, and your thin cotton robe would stick to your back. But the ritual of uchimizu was a kind of psychological air conditioning, a way of telling your mind that it was cool, even when your body knew otherwise. It was a shared act of imagination, a tiny daily theatre of comfort. Now let us return to the matter of bathing, because even the way you washed your body was a performance of rank. The bath in a medieval Japanese home was not a private, leisurely soak. It was a large wooden tub, filled with water that had been heated only once over a fire. The order in which you entered that water was rigidly hierarchical. First, the men of the household would bathe, starting with the head of the family, then the sons, then any male servants or stable hands. By the time the women were allowed to enter, the water was already cloudy and cooling, carrying the residue of all those bodies that had come before. Then the women would bathe in their own order of seniority, and finally the children, who were last and got the coldest, murkiest water of all. You would soak in that water, already used by your father, your brothers, and the man who shoveled the horse manure, and you would be grateful for the warmth, because it was still warmth, and the alternative was not bathing at all. The bath was a lesson in humility, a physical reminder that your comfort came after everyone else's, and that even the most intimate acts were governed by the great chain of being. And through all of this, time itself was measured in a way that seems almost impossibly poetic to us now. There were no clocks ticking on the wall, no mechanical chimes. Instead, you would tell time by the smell of burning incense. Incense sticks were calibrated to burn at a steady rate, and different scents marked different hours. You might be sitting in the kotatsu, half dozing, and you would catch a shift in the fragrance, a new note of sandalwood or clove, and you would know that an hour had passed. If you were late for an appointment, you could always blame the wind for blowing the stick faster, and your boss would nod sympathetically, because everyone understood that time was a fluid, fragrant thing, not a rigid grid. The temple bells would ring at intervals, their deep, resonant tones rolling across the rooftops. But inside the house, it was the incense that kept the rhythm of the day, a slow, aromatic heartbeat that marked the hours without urgency. So picture yourself there, in that house of paper and wood, where every action was a tiny ritual. You have placed your sandals with care. You have remembered to change out of the toilet slippers. You have swept the floor in a luck-trapping spiral. You have bathed in water that was already used by half the household, and now you are settling down for the night. Your head carefully pointed east, your body arranged in the correct spot according to your rank. The fish oil lamp is burning low, filling the room with its savory, smoky scent, and the incense stick is sending up a thin, straight line of fragrance that tells you it is time to sleep. Outside, the wind is rattling the paper screens, and you can hear the soft, distant sound of a temple bell, marking the hour. Under the kotatsu quilt, your feet are warm in the ashes, and the rest of your body is cool, but not unpleasantly so. The rules that governed your day were intricate, sometimes absurd, often exhausting, but they also gave a shape to the world, a sense that every moment was part of a larger, ordered pattern. And as you drift off, the smell of incense and fish oil and wet earth from the evening's uchimizu all blend together into a single drowsy perfume, the scent of a home that was, in its own strange way, a kind of theatre, and you, just for a moment, its quiet, obedient actor. The snow continues to fall, the cicadas have fallen silent, and the house settles into the deep, breathing stillness of the night, carrying you gently, gently into dreams. Imagine you wake, not to an alarm, but to the soft, rhythmic sound of a wooden whisk brushing against the textured sides of a tea bowl, a sound so faint it might be the rustle of a sparrow in the eaves. The morning light, thin and watery as rice starch, filters through the paper screens, and you rise from your futon, your body still carrying the memory of the night's deep stillness. The house around you is already a quiet hive of activity, your servants moving on silent feet across the tatami, their breath misting slightly in the cool air. And as you settle yourself on the worn indigo cushion of the eating platform, a low lacquered table is placed before you, a stage set for a performance you have rehearsed since childhood. This is the theatre of the meal, and the curtain is about to rise. The first thing you notice, of course, is the silence. It is not an empty silence, not the awkward pause of a conversation that has died, but a full, purposeful quiet, a shared understanding that eating is a private act, even when done in company. The only sounds are the gentle clink of ceramic, the soft slide of a lid being lifted, the almost imperceptible hiss of steam escaping from a bowl of miso soup. You would no more think of chattering over your breakfast than you would of whistling during a temple ceremony. To speak would be to break the spell, to scatter your attention from the sacred task of receiving nourishment. And so, you begin your movements as deliberate and graceful as a calligrapher's first stroke on a fresh sheet of paper. Now, the order in which you approach your meal is not a matter of preference, but of deep, unspoken law. To an outsider, the array of small, exquisite dishes might look like a puzzle, a tiny landscape of food to be explored at whim. But you know better. You reach first, always, for the soup. The lacquered bowl is warm in your palm, its gentle heat a comfort. You lift it with both hands, a gesture of respect for the nourishment it holds, and you sip directly from the rim, tasting the salt of the sea, the earthiness of the fermented soybean paste. Only after you have taken this first, grounding sip, do you set the bowl down and lift your chopsticks. Next comes the rice, a small, perfect mound of it, in a bowl that fits your hand like a smooth stone from a riverbed. You take a bite, the individual grains distinct and slightly sticky, a clean, pure taste that resets your palate. To reach for the pickles first, those glistening slices of yellow daikon, or the wrinkled, salt-crusted plum, would be a small catastrophe. The entire room, even if no one's eyes are on you, would register the reach. It would be like putting on your left sandal before your right, a subtle but unmistakable sign that you were not properly raised, that the essential rhythms of the world are foreign to you. The pickles come third, their sharp vinegary crunch a punctuation mark after the gentle sentence of the soup and rice. The side dishes, a sliver of grilled fish, a mound of simmered mountain vegetables, a cube of chilled tofu with a drip of soy sauce, are the supporting actors, to be appreciated only after the leads have had their moment. Your chopsticks, those simple slivers of wood or bamboo, are an extension of your soul, and they carry a weight of taboo that would feel, to a modern heart, almost impossibly heavy. You handle them with the focused care of a swordsmith polishing a blade. There are things you simply do not do. Actions so freighted with funereal meaning that a single misstep could turn a pleasant meal into a moment of shared horror. You would never, ever, stick your chopsticks upright in your rice bowl, planting them there like two thin grave markers. That is an image reserved for the altar of the dead, an offering of rice to a spirit, the chopsticks standing sentinel in the bowl as incense smoke curls around them. To do so at the table is to invite death into the room, to cast a sudden chilling shadow over the warm light of the meal. And then there is the passing of food. Imagine a friend, meaning only kindness, picks up a tender piece of braised fish with their chopsticks and offers it directly to yours. Your hand would recoil as if from a flame. You would feel a cold prickle on your skin. Because that gesture, chopsticks to chopsticks, bone to bone, is the most sacred and sorrowful part of the cremation ritual. After the body is consumed by fire, the family gathers and with long special chopsticks, they pluck the remaining bones from the ashes and pass them, one to another, in a solemn chain, until they are placed in the urn. To mimic this with a piece of mackerel is an unthinkable desecration, a blurring of the line between a kitchen and a grave. If it happened, you would have to ritually purify your hands, washing away the taint of that accidental brush with mortality. The very presence of meat on your table is a quiet, complicated negotiation with the divine. The teachings of the Buddha, which have seeped into the soil of your world like spring rain, hold that the flesh of four-legged animals is unclean, a sin to consume. The idea of eating a cow or a pig is not just distasteful, it is a spiritual pollution, a heaviness that clings to your soul. A chicken, a creature of 2 legs and feathers, exists in a slightly grayer area, but still, its consumption could bring severe social censure, even exile from your community. And yet, the human body is a stubborn thing, with cravings and ailments that do not always bow to scripture. So, a beautiful linguistic loophole was born, a way to cleanse the sin with a new name. If you were ill and a doctor, a man of practical learning, prescribed the meat of a wild boar or a deer to restore your strength and warm your blood, you would not refuse. But you would not call it by its true name. You would look at the dark, rich meat simmering in its pot, and you would call it Yamakujira, mountain whale. A whale, you see, is a creature of the vast, purifying ocean, a fish in the grand, generous taxonomy of the kitchen, even if a scholar might whisper that it breathes air. By this small act of renaming, the four-legged beast of the forest became a permissible gift from the sea. its meat transformed into a medicine for the body, not a poison for the spirit. You could dine on your venison, your guilt washed away by the salt water of a convenient fiction. This dance of denial and desire was perhaps most intricate within the walls of a Buddhist monastery. As a monk, you would have shaved your head, a symbol of your renunciation of the vanity of the world. Your days would be governed by a strict rule, and your diet would be a monument to self-denial. A spare, vegetarian cuisine known as Shojin Ryori. Your meals were a meditation on simplicity: a bowl of rice, a soup of seaweed, 2 small dishes of pickled radish, a cube of cold, silken tofu seasoned with nothing more than a drop of soy sauce, and a shaving of dried bonito, which, being fish, was a matter of its own theological debate. The flavors were subtle, the textures a quiet study in softness and crunch. The pickled radish, a bright, almost fluorescent yellow, was a staple, its sour pungent bite a daily reminder of the path's austerity. And yet the flesh is weak. History is full of quiet, knowing smiles about monks who, in the strict privacy of their quarters, or in a tea house on the outskirts of the pleasure quarters, might loosen their robes and partake of something more substantial. A dish of wild fowl, perhaps, given the secret name of a vegetable. A flask of sake, euphemistically called tea. The rules were absolute, but the human spirit's talent for finding a crack in the wall, a shadow where a different truth could live, was just as absolute. But perhaps no ritual encapsulates the profound, almost sacred choreography of consumption quite like the tea ceremony. It is not merely a drink, it is a journey, a temporary departure from the world of dust and noise into a realm of pure, aesthetic silence. You receive an invitation, and you walk through a garden path of damp green moss and irregular stepping stones, a path designed to quiet your mind. You come to a tiny, almost comical door, a low square opening in the wall of the tea house, no more than about 2.5 feet high. This is the Nijiriguchi, the crawling-in entrance. There is no other way. You, a proud samurai, perhaps, or a wealthy merchant, must kneel on the ground, bow your head, and crawl inside on your hands and knees. The door forces this humility upon you, a physical reminder that in this space, all worldly rank is left outside in the dust. The sword, the symbol of your status, must be removed and left on a rack outside. Inside, you are simply a guest, a soul seeking a moment of peace. The room is a poem of rustic simplicity. Rough clay walls, a single hanging scroll with a brush painting of a misty mountain, a simple flower arrangement in a bamboo vase. The light is dim, the air thick with the scent of old wood and the faint, grassy whisper of the tatami. The host, moving with an economy of motion that has been practiced for a lifetime, cleanses the utensils with a silk cloth, each gesture a study in grace. The water boils in an iron kettle, and the sound is not a whistle, but a deep, resonant, bubbling sigh, a sound the tea masters call the wind in the pines. You are served a small sweet cake to balance the bitterness of the tea to come, and then the bowl is placed before you. It is a rough, asymmetrical piece of pottery, beautiful in its imperfection. You bow, lifting it with your right hand and placing it in the palm of your left. Now comes the moment of exquisite precision. You turn the bowl. Exactly twice, clockwise. The first turn is a small, deliberate quarter circle. The second completes the half rotation. This is not a casual spin. It is a gesture of profound humility, turning the bowl's most beautiful, decorated face away from your lips so you do not drink from its front. A sign that you are not worthy of its beauty. You admire the shape of the bowl, the way the glaze pools in a tiny, glassy puddle at the bottom. You drink the thick, jade green, bitter froth in 3.5 sips. The final sip, a soft, audible slurp that signals your enjoyment and completion. You then wipe the rim where your lips touched it, using your thumb and forefinger in a precise, prescribed motion, and turn the bowl back, counterclockwise, to admire its face once more before passing it on. If you forgot to turn it, if you drank from the front, the host would be mortally offended. It would be a social wound that might never heal, a silent, elegant door closed forever. The entire ceremony is a conversation conducted in breath, gesture, and the shared appreciation of a single, perfect moment, a bubble of tranquility in a world of chaos. As the day softens into evening, and you return to your own home, the memory of the tea's bitterness lingers on your tongue, a clean, green taste. You settle down to your evening meal, the strict order of soup, rice, and pickles, a familiar, comforting rhythm. The oil lamp casts a warm, savory scented glow, and you handle your chopsticks with the ingrained care of a lifetime, keeping them neatly parallel on their small ceramic rest, never pointing, never passing. The rules that govern your table are a dense, intricate web, a code of conduct that could feel, to a stranger, like a trap. But to you, they are the invisible architecture of a civilized life. A way of transforming the simple, animal act of eating into something elevated, a quiet prayer of gratitude and attention. The world outside the paper screens may be a place of uncertainty and strife. But here, in the precise angle of a lifted bowl, in the silent, shared understanding of a taboo, there is order, there is beauty. And as the last grain of rice is eaten, and the final sip of tea is taken, a deep, quiet peace settles over the house. A stillness as complete and comforting as the falling of snow, carrying you gently, gently towards sleep. And as the last grain of rice is eaten, and the final sip of tea is taken, a deep, quiet peace settles over the house, a stillness as complete and comforting as the falling of snow, carrying you gently, gently towards sleep. Now, as you drift in that quiet space between waking and dreaming, you might notice that the darkness outside the paper screen is not empty. It is full of presences, of spirits, of a world that runs parallel to our own, as close as the breath on your upper lip. In medieval Japan, the unseen was not a matter of belief or disbelief, it was simply a fact, like the wetness of rain or the warmth of the sun. The spirit world was a neighbor. It required a certain etiquette. You couldn't see it, not usually, but you could feel its gaze, and you learned, from your very first moments, how to move through a world that was watching you back. Imagine you are a child again, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, playing in the dust of a village path. A neighbor calls out to you, and the name they use is not a name you would choose for yourself. They call you garbage, or ugly, or perhaps simply fool. And you answer to it without a flicker of resentment, because you know, in the unspoken way children know these things, that this is a form of love. Your parents, you see, wanted you to survive. In a time when a fever or a bad harvest could take a child as easily as a wind takes a blossom, there was another, more sinister threat, the spirit. Demons, wandering ghosts, minor deities in a mischievous mood, all of them might look down at a beautiful, beloved child and think, "I'll have that one." A child with a name like Treasure or First Son was a gleaming jewel, too tempting to leave untouched. But a child called Dirt? A child called Stray Dog? The demons would pass right by, their attention sliding off something so worthless, so unappealing. And so, until you came of age, until you were strong enough, rooted enough in this world to be safe, you wore your ugly name like a cloak of invisibility. It was only later, in a ceremony that marked your true entry into the community, that you would be given your real adult name, shedding the protective layer of insult like a snake sheds its skin. You can almost feel the rough affection in it, a mother smoothing dirt on her toddler's cheek before they go out to play. A father calling his son rubbish with a secret, tender smile. This sense of a world teeming with invisible forces shaped not just the quiet moments, but the loud, joyful, chaotic ones too. Picture, if you will, the coldest night of the year. The air is so sharp it feels like it might crack, and the breath of every person in the village rises in plumes of white steam. This is the night of the Naked Festival, the Hadaka Matsuri, and you are not in your warm bed. You are standing with 100 other men, your body stripped down to nothing but a thin white loincloth, the skin on your arms already prickled into goosebumps. The darkness is lit by flickering torchlight, and the air smells of sweat and sake and the particular electric charge of a crowd about to do something wonderfully, gloriously absurd. At the heart of the scrum, a priest throws a sacred wooden stick, a shingi, into the mass of bodies. It is about the length of your forearm, wrapped in paper and blessed, and for the next few moments, it becomes the most desirable object in the universe. You lunge. 100 other men lunge with you. The cold is forgotten, replaced by the furnace heat of grappling bodies, the slick feel of, say, skin on skin, the roar of the spectators who are throwing buckets of icy water onto the writhing pile just to add to the glorious freezing mayhem. The goal is to wrestle that stick free and carry it to the shrine, and the man who does is the lucky man for the entire year. The gods, it is said, look down on this spectacle of shivering, shouting, half-naked humanity, and they laugh, a deep, approving, divine laughter, and into that laughter they pour a year's worth of fortune for the victor. It is a messy, bruising, utterly undignified affair, and it is a profound act of communal joy, a way of throwing your whole body into a conversation with the sacred. Even the most beautiful, serene rituals had a whisper of the other world running through them. Think of the cherry blossoms. For one brief, breathtaking week in spring, the entire social order would soften, just a little, under a canopy of pink and white. This was Hanami, the flower viewing, and it was one of the rare times when a merchant might spread his mat not far from a samurai, when a farmer could tilt his head back and gaze at the same froth of petals as a court noble. You would pack a simple meal, perhaps a ball of rice wrapped in a pickled leaf, and you would sit with your family or your friends and let the beauty of the blossoms do its quiet work. The air would be thick with the scent of the flowers, a delicate, almondy sweetness, and the petals would fall like a slow, silent snow, landing in your hair, floating in your cup of sake. There was a gentle, unspoken permission in the air. You could get a little drunk, you could laugh a little louder, you could recite a clumsy poem without fear of a sharp rebuke. But even here, in this soft pink dream, the rules were present, as firm as the roots of the old cherry tree. You could not break a branch. The tree itself was a living thing, a vessel for a spirit, and to snap its limb for a souvenir was an act of violence against the beauty that hosted you. If you did, the relaxation would vanish in an instant. The punishment would be swift and physical, a flogging that would leave you sore and sorry, a stark reminder that the grace of the moment was a gift, not a right. The petals were free, but the tree was not. This intimacy with the unseen extended to the creatures who shared your home. A cat was not just a cat. A cat was a guardian of silk, a silent warrior against the mice that would gnaw through your most precious robes. A cat was a family member, with a personality as distinct and cherished as any human's. And when that beloved cat died, the grief was real and ritualized. You might, if your heart was truly broken, take a small knife and shave off your own eyebrows. Imagine looking in a bronze mirror and seeing your own face, suddenly strange. The bare brow, a public declaration of private sorrow. You would arrange for a Buddhist funeral, burying your companion with a prayer bead tucked beside its still form, chanting sutras to guide its spirit not into oblivion, but into a new role as a guardian spirit for your household. The loss was not an ending, but a transformation. The quiet friend at the hearth becoming a quiet protector in the shadows. And the shadows were always there. A sneeze, for instance, was not just a tickle in the nose. A sneeze was a crack in your spiritual armor, a momentary gap through which a demon could slip inside and take up residence. You can almost feel the tiny superstitious jolt of fear that would follow a sudden hakushon in a quiet room. The way a hand might instinctively fly to cover the mouth, not for politeness, but to block the door. And at night, the mind would wander through the landscapes of sleep, and those landscapes were maps of the future. Dreams were not random firings of a resting brain. They were messages, omens to be decoded with the utmost seriousness. If you dreamed of a snake, a long, slithering ribbon of it, coiling through your sleep, you would wake with a cold knot in your stomach. A snake meant loss, a financial drain, a business deal about to go sour. You would rush to the temple that very morning, your sandals flapping on the packed earth, to buy a protective charm. A little talisman to ward off the misfortune slithering toward you. You would stay awake the next night, almost afraid to sleep, desperately trying to steer your mind toward a better vision. A hawk, perhaps, soaring high and sharp-eyed, was a good omen. But the best dream of all, the luckiest image that could possibly visit you, was Mount Fuji. To dream of its perfect, snow-capped cone rising into a clear sky was a promise of unparalleled good fortune. A blessing so potent that people would plan their whole year around the hope of receiving it. This belief that the world was alive and responsive, reached all the way down into the ground beneath your feet. When the earth began to tremble, when the teacups rattled on their shelf, and the wooden beams of the house groaned, you did not think of tectonic plates. You thought of the catfish. Deep, deep below the islands of Japan, there lived a giant catfish, a creature of immense, slumbering power called Namazu. And sometimes he would roll over in his subterranean sea, or thrash his great, whiskered head, and the whole world would shake. This was not a distant, abstract myth. This was an immediate, practical reality. You would run outside, your heart hammering, and you would shout at the catfish, your voice joining the voices of your neighbors, a chorus of scolding and pleading rising up from the trembling village. "Be still, Namazu, be still down there." And you would bargain with him as you might bargain with a grumpy, oversized house pet. You would promise him a rice cake, a sticky, sweet offering, if he would just settle down and go back to sleep. The idea of shouting at a fish the size of a mountain range, promising it a snack in exchange for not destroying your home, is a deeply human response, a way of turning a terrifying, uncontrollable force into something you could at least have a conversation with. And finally, there was the ritual that perhaps most perfectly captured this dance with the spirit world: the sumo match. Before the giants in their silk aprons ever locked arms, the ring itself had to be purified. The referee, a figure of absolute authority, would step into the sacred circle, and you would notice the dagger tucked into his belt. It was not for show. It was a symbol, a silent statement that he was prepared to perform ritual suicide if he made a mistake that dishonored the proceedings. The weight of that dagger gave every call, every judgment, a profound gravity. Then, the wrestlers would perform the shiko, the great, slow, deliberate stomp. One leg would lift, impossibly high, the body a study in balanced tension, and then the foot would crash down onto the clay, a flat, percussive boom that you could feel in your chest. Again and again. This was not a stretch. This was demon quashing. Each stomp was designed to drive any lurking evil spirits out of the ground, to flatten them, to send them scattering from the purified space where the contest of strength would take place. The wrestlers, in their immense, sculpted bodies, were not just athletes. They were living talismans, their every move a prayer for order in a world that was always brushing up against chaos. The stomp, the salt thrown in a pure white arc, the dagger at the referee's hip. It was all a quiet, powerful conversation with the unseen, a way of saying, "This space is ours for now. You are not welcome here." And as the final stomp echoes and fades, leaving only the scent of clay and sweat and the soft rustle of the crowd, you can feel the boundary hold, the circle of light in the vast, watching darkness, a small, hard-won pocket of peace. And as that final, grounding stomp from the sumo ring fades into the earth, the world shifts, softens, becomes something quieter still. Imagine you are no longer in the open air of the wrestling arena, but in a room of tatami mats, their scent a gentle grassy whisper. A room where the light is not the harsh glare of the sun, but the warm, liquid gold of an oil lamp, or perhaps the cool, silver glow of a moon you have all gathered to watch. This is the cultured life, the life of the mind and the senses, and it is, in its own way, just as demanding as the warrior's path. A single misplaced word, a shaky line of ink, a wrong guess in the dark. These were not small mistakes. They were earthquakes of the soul, capable of shattering a reputation built over a lifetime. Picture yourself now on a clear autumn evening. The air carrying that specific, crisp coolness that makes you want to reach for another layer of silk. It is the 15th night of the 8th month, the night of the harvest moon. And you are at a moon viewing party. The garden has been meticulously prepared for this single purpose. A small, elegant table has been placed on the veranda, not to look at, but to hold the offerings. Little round rice dumplings, white as the moon itself, and a carefully arranged spray of Suzuki grass, its feathery plumes catching the breeze like delicate silver tails. The sake is being warmed, and you can hear the soft, comforting gurgle of the tokery flask in its bath of hot water. The conversation is hushed, expectant. Everyone is waiting for the moon to clear the branches of the eastern maple tree, a moment that has been calculated with the precision of a general planning a campaign. You are not just here to look at the moon. You are here to feel it. to capture it, to fold it into a 17-syllable container and offer it back to the world. The moon's reflection, trembling in your shallow sake cup, is not just a pretty image. It is a tiny personal piece of good fortune you will drink down, a sip of pure, liquid light. Now, the host, a person of refined taste, whose patronage keeps your rice stores full, will gently tap a fan against their palm. The signal. It is time for poetry. And this is where the quiet panic sets in, a flutter in your stomach that the warm sake does nothing to settle. You'd spend hours, perhaps days, counting syllables on your fingers before this moment. You'd mouth the words to yourself in the dark of your own room, tapping out the rhythm on your knee. 5, 7, 5. A poem with a pattern of 6, 7, 5 was not a charming variation. It was a social disaster, a discordant note that would make the night's crickets sound more melodious. Your mind races through the seasonal keywords you must use. The moon itself, of course, is an autumn word. But you need another layer, a subtle echo. The sound of insects, the color of a specific chrysanthemum, a miscount, a clunky phrase, a seasonal word that belongs to spring instead of fall, and the patron's face would remain a polite, impassive mask. The next day, a messenger might arrive, not with the usual basket of rice and dried fish, but with a short, cold note. Your stipend, your place in this glittering, fragile world, could vanish like the dew on the Suzuki grass by mid-morning. The silence stretches as you all compose, the only sound the scratch of a brush on paper, the soft clink of a sake cup being set down. The pressure is immense, a weight far heavier than a samurai's armor, because it is a weight measured in syllables. That brush in your hand, meanwhile, is a window to your very soul. Calligraphy was not just writing, it was a visual echo of your character. Imagine you are a young man, and your heart has been captured by the fleeting glimpse of a sleeve from behind a bamboo screen. You wish to send a letter, a first, tentative thread of connection. You would practice those brushstrokes until your wrist ached with a dull, persistent throb. You'd grind the ink stick on the stone for what felt like an hour, breathing in the faint, sooty scent, mixing it with water until the black was the perfect depth. Not a shade too grey, not a shade too thick. The paper, a soft, fibrous sheet, lies before you like a field of snow. A single drop of sweat from your brow could ruin it. Your hand must be a conduit for pure feeling, but it must also be steady. A shaky line, a blot where the brush hesitated, a character that leaned slightly too far to the left. These were not aesthetic flaws. To the father of the woman you admired, a man who would intercept this letter before it ever reached her, a shaky line meant a shaky character. A sloppy, unbalanced character meant a sloppy, unbalanced soul. He would judge you, completely and irrevocably, before reading a single word of your carefully composed poem. He would see the tremor of your hand, and imagine a man who would tremble in a crisis, a man whose inner life was a mess of splattered ink. The letter would be refolded, perhaps with a sigh, and your suit would be rejected, not for what you said, but for how you held the brush. The paper itself, the very act of wrapping it, was a language of its own. You'd spend an entire afternoon wrapping a single dried fish, because the wrapping was more important than the gift itself. The type of paper, its texture, the precise, crisp angle of a fold, all of it spoke. A knot tied in a certain way could convey a wish for long life. A fold that was too loose, too casual, could be a mortal insult, a message that whispered, "I wish you dead." The gift inside, that humble piece of fish, was almost an afterthought, a mere excuse for the eloquent, silent conversation happening in paper and cord. Now let the evening deepen. The moon viewing party might move indoors, and the pursuit of beauty would take an even more intimate, mysterious turn. You are invited to a game of incense, a guessing game that is the pinnacle of sensory refinement. The room is dark, or lit by a single, guttering lamp that throws more shadows than light. You sit in a circle, all of you silent, your senses straining. The host, a master of the art, places a tiny, precious sliver of fragrant wood onto a heated mica plate buried in a cup of ash. A wisp of smoke rises, and the scent begins to unfurl in the warm, still air. You lean forward, close your eyes, and breathe in. This is not just a smell, it is a story. You'd sit in that dark room and sniff burning wood chips, trying to name the exact tree, the exact origin. Is that the deep, resinous, almost medicinal scent of aloes wood, a piece of wood so rare it was worth its weight in gold? Or is it sandalwood, a softer, creamier, more milky fragrance that reminds you of a temple on a hot day? Perhaps it is a blend, a secret recipe known only to the host, mixing clove, cinnamon, and a hint of something floral, like plum blossom. The goal was to identify the ingredients, to name the unseen, to prove that your nose was as cultured as your mind. The competition was fierce, but utterly silent, a battle of inhaled breaths and thoughtful exhalations. The winner, the one who correctly named the most scents, would not receive a title or land. They would receive a silk robe, a garment so fine it could be pulled through a ring, and that robe would smell of the victory itself. The deep, complex, lingering scent of aloes wood, clinging to the fibers for weeks, a fragrant, wearable trophy that announced your refined sensibilities to everyone who came near. In this world of flickering light and deep shadows, seeing yourself clearly was a rare and precious thing. A bronze mirror was not a simple object you'd find in any home. It was a treasured heirloom. Passed down through generations, its surface holding the reflections of your grandmother, your great-grandmother, all the faces that came before. You'd polish your bronze mirror with a soft cloth and a paste of rice bran, rubbing in slow, careful circles until the dull, golden-brown surface began to gleam, and a ghostly image of your own face would swim up from the depths. It was a soft reflection, a little hazy, a little mysterious, as if you were seeing yourself through a veil of time. And if you dropped it, if that heavy, precious disc slipped from your fingers and cracked on the wooden floor, you'd cry for a week. It wasn't just the cost, though a good mirror could cost a year's wages. It was the feeling that your reflection, your very image, was now fractured forever, a wound in the family's soul that would bring 7 years of bad luck. It would be stored, when not in use, in a silk pouch, tucked away like a sleeping treasure, its power and its fragility both honored. And what of the most refined, most complex art of all? The art of human connection in the licensed pleasure quarters, where the rules of engagement were a dance of impossible subtlety. Imagine you are a wealthy merchant, a man of means but no pedigree, and you have become infatuated with a courtesan of the highest rank, a woman whose name is whispered like a poem. You cannot simply walk in and speak to her. You'd have to visit her 3 times before she'd even acknowledge your existence with a single word. The first visit, you are a ghost. You sit in the room, you spend an exorbitant amount of money on food and drink for the house, and she sits, a painted silent statue in a kimono that weighs 30 pounds, its layers of embroidered silk trailing behind her like a frozen river. She will not look at you, she will not speak. She is assessing you, or rather, her attendants are, noting your manners, your taste in gifts, the quality of the poetry you leave behind. The second visit, perhaps, a slight thaw. A cup of sake might be poured by her hand, though still in silence. You'd pay a fortune just to watch her walk in a parade, a grand procession through the quarter, her kimono trailing like a silk river, her hair a sculpture of lacquer and tortoiseshell combs, her face a perfect white mask. The third visit, if your gifts have been exquisite, if your poetry has shown a depth of feeling and a flawless command of the 575, if your wealth has proven to be as deep as your patience, then, and only then, she might speak. The first word from her lips was a victory more hard won than any on a battlefield. And when the evening ended, she would sleep, not on a soft pillow, but on a wooden block, a lacquered stand, designed to protect that elaborate, towering hairstyle, a structure that took hours to build and could not be disturbed. She would balance her neck on that hard, unyielding wood, a final, quiet discipline in a life dedicated to the most demanding art of all. All of it, the moon, the ink, the scent, the silence, was a single, woven fabric, a way of finding a small, perfect, fleeting moment of beauty in a world that was, as you've seen, so often defined by rigid order and sudden violence. The cultured life was not a gentle escape from the rules. It was the rules, distilled into their most potent, most beautiful, and most terrifying form. A world where a poem could feed you, a brushstroke could marry you, a scent could clothe you, and a single, miscounted syllable could make you disappear. So breathe in the scent of the aloes wood, Feel the smooth brush in your hand, and watch the moon's reflection tremble in your cup, a small, perfect circle of silver light in the vast, quiet dark. Imagine, for a moment, that you are walking down a dusty road in the countryside, the late afternoon sun casting long, honey-colored shadows through the cedar trees. The air is warm and still, carrying the scent of dry earth and the faint, sweet tang of wood smoke from a distant village. You've been walking for a while, and the road ahead is quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a held breath. And as you round a bend, you see a small procession coming the other way. But something is different about it. The figures are walking on the opposite side of the road, hugging the very edge where the weeds grow tall. They are dressed in simple, unadorned clothes, and they move with a careful, deliberate gait, their eyes fixed on the ground, a few feet ahead of them. As they pass, you notice that the people you were walking with, a few farmers heading home from the fields, have also stepped to the far side of the road, creating a wide, empty channel of dust between themselves and the other group. No one speaks. No one makes eye contact. It's as if those other travelers are not even there, as if they are ghosts who have somehow learned to cast a shadow. You have just witnessed the quiet, daily choreography of a world within a world, the shadow world of medieval Japan's outcasts. Now, you might be wondering who those people were, and why the road suddenly felt like a river with an invisible current pushing everyone apart. They were members of a class called the Ita, a word that translates, with a chilling bluntness, to an abundance of filth. And their place in society was not just at the bottom of the ladder, it was off the ladder entirely. The rigid, four-tiered class system you've drifted through in other dreams. The samurai, the farmers, the artisans, the merchants, was, in a strange way, a privilege. Because beneath even the barefoot merchant, there existed a whole other category of people who were not counted as human at all. They were hinin, non-people, and the Ita were a part of this shadow world. If you were born into an Ita family, your destiny was sealed before you drew your first breath. Your family's work was with death and with the bodies of animals. They were the butchers, the tanners, the leather workers. In a society governed by Buddhist precepts that viewed the taking of a life and the touch of dead flesh as a source of profound spiritual pollution. Or kikere, the people who performed these necessary tasks became polluted by association. It was a stain that could never be washed away, a hereditary taint passed down through the blood. Picture the scene if a death occurred in your own home. The body of your loved one would not be handled by a priest or a family member, but by the Ita. They would come quietly, perform their duties with a practiced, somber efficiency, and then leave, taking the physical pollution with them. But the spiritual stain lingered in the house. For days afterward, your family would be engaged in an elaborate ritual of purification. You'd scrub the floors and walls with salt, a substance believed to have cleansing powers. You'd avoid certain foods. You'd be considered ritually unclean yourself, unable to visit a shrine or touch anything sacred until a priest could perform the proper rites. The Ita who had taken the body away lived in their own segregated hamlets, often on the outskirts of towns, near the execution grounds or the village dump. These were places no one else would go. They were forbidden from entering a town after dark, and during the day, their presence was governed by 1,000 unspoken rules. They could not touch a person of a higher class, not even the sleeve of their kimono. If they did, they could be killed on the spot, with no legal consequence for the killer. Their lives were considered so worthless that, in some domains, a samurai testing a new sword was legally permitted to use the body of an Ita for practice, a fact recorded with a chillingly bureaucratic note. 1. Ita cut. No human casualties. Now let your mind drift away from the dusty road and the quiet hamlet, and picture a very different kind of hidden place. Imagine a landscape of steep, forested mountains, their peaks lost in a soft, perpetual mist. The paths here are narrow, little more than deer trails, winding between ancient pines and over moss-covered boulders. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and pine needles, and tucked away in a fold of these mountains, invisible from any official road, is a village. This is not a place you would ever find by accident. The houses are simple, but the people who live there are not simple farmers. They are a clan of shinobi, the ones we now call ninja. Their entire existence is a secret. You'd be born into this life of shadows, and from the time you could walk, you'd be trained not in the way of the sword. You'd learn to move without sound, to read the weather from the shape of a cloud, to become invisible not by magic, but by becoming a part of the landscape itself. A patient shadow among the rocks. Your family's code of secrecy was absolute. The village's location, its techniques, its very name, were a sacred trust. If you were ever captured on a mission, you knew your fate. There would be no trial, no honorable seppuku. The punishment for a captured spy was designed to be a deterrent of pure terror. You would be boiled alive, slowly, in a great iron cauldron of oil. The agony was unimaginable, but the code demanded one final, impossible act of will. You must never reveal your clan's name, your village's location. If you held your silence to the end, your family, your children, would be safe. Your silence was the final, terrible gift you gave them. But how, you might wonder, did a castle lord protect himself from such shadows, from the silent step of an assassin who had trained their whole life to be a ghost? The answer was a marvel of defensive architecture, a floor that sang. Imagine you are now a guest, perhaps a minor lord walking through the corridors of a great castle. You have left your swords at the entrance, of course, a ritual of trust and submission. The corridor ahead is long and polished, the wooden beams dark with age. As you take a step, you hear a sound, a soft musical chirping, like a nightingale singing in a distant grove. You take another step, and the sound comes again, a gentle, rhythmic creak that seems to emanate from the floorboards themselves. This is the yuguisubari, the nightingale floor. The boards are not nailed down flat, they rest on a series of metal clamps and hinges beneath the surface. When weight is applied, the boards shift ever so slightly, and the metal rubs against metal, producing that distinctive, bird-like chirp. The genius of the design was not that it prevented a silent step, but that it made a silent step an impossibility. The floor was a constant, gentle alarm system. You were expected to make it sing. A silent step was the only sound that would trigger alarm, for it meant an assassin who had found a way to cheat the floor. And the guards knew that the punishment for such a silent step was the same as for the captured ninja, a slow, agonizing death in boiling oil. So you walked, and the floor sang your peaceful intentions with every step, a delicate, life-preserving melody. This constant, low hum of surveillance extended far beyond the castle walls. To move at all in medieval Japan was to be watched. Imagine you need to travel from your village to the next province, perhaps to sell some cloth or visit a distant relative. You can't simply pack a bag and go. You need a travel permit, a tegata. This was a wooden passport, a thin, rectangular board on which was written your name, your village, your destination, and the purpose of your journey. You'd carry it with you at all times, and the roads were punctuated by frequent checkpoints, often at bridges or mountain passes. Picture yourself approaching one of these barriers. A rough wooden gate blocks the road, and a group of stern-faced officials waits. You hand over your wooden passport, your heart perhaps beating a little faster, even if you have nothing to hide. The official scrutinizes the board, then looks at you, then back at the board. He asks your name, your destination. If your story matches the permit, you are waved through with a grunt. But, if the characters are smudged, if you hesitate for even a moment, the atmosphere changes instantly. The penalty for traveling without proper papers, or for being suspected of being a spy or a bandit, was swift and brutal. You would be tied to a wooden cross erected by the roadside, a grim warning to all who passed. There, exposed to the elements, you would be left to die, a silent, suffering punctuation mark on the landscape, a reminder that the space between places was a space of suspicion. And yet, even in this world of rigid control and shadowy outcasts, there were corners of strange, vibrant contradiction. Let your mind drift now to a city, to the bustling, lantern-lit pleasure quarters. The air is thick with the smell of grilled eel, sake, and the faint, powdery scent of white makeup. A crowd has gathered before a wooden stage, their faces upturned and rapt. On stage, a figure moves with an electrifying, androgynous grace, their kimono a cascade of silks, their face a mask of vivid paint. This is a kabuki actor, And in this moment, they are a superstar. The crowd roars, throws coins, calls out their name. They are the center of the universe, an object of intense adoration and fashion. But the moment the performance ends, the magic evaporates. The actor steps off the stage and into the street, and a profound transformation takes place. Legally, they are an outcast, a kawaramono, a revivered person. So named because they lived in the dry riverbeds, the marginal, untaxed spaces of the city. They are confined to a segregated district, just like the Eta. And now, as they walk home, still in their flamboyant costume, they must step aside for a common rice farmer. They must bow, lower their painted eyes, and address him with a term of respect. The farmer, who could never dream of such artistry, such fame, is legally their superior. The actor is a living paradox, a creature of pure light on stage, who, the moment the lanterns are dimmed, must dissolve back into the shadows, less than human, in the eyes of the law that governs the daylight world. So as you feel the weight of sleep settling over you, hold this final, complex image in your mind. A world of nightingale floors that sang a warning, of wooden passports that were a lifeline, of hidden villages where children learned to become shadows, and of people who handled the dead so the rest of society could remain pure. It was a world that pushed its most necessary, its most brilliant, and its most terrifying elements into the corners, creating a shadow world that was not separate from the society of rules and order, but was in fact its foundation. The beautiful, rigid, cultured world you dreamed of earlier could only exist because it was propped up by these shadows, by the people it refused to see. And as you drift off, you can almost hear the soft, fading chirp of a nightingale floor, a sound that is both a song and a warning. A lullaby from a world that never truly slept, but simply divided itself into the seen and the unseen, the light and the dark, the pure and the forever impure. In the senate of the pine needles on a hidden mountain path, and let the quiet, complex darkness of that world be the soft, dark blanket that carries you into sleep. Now imagine that the world you've just glimpsed, the hidden villages, the chirping floors, the people who were seen and unseen, did not simply vanish when the medieval period ended. Instead, it cast a long, soft shadow forward, a shadow that stretched across centuries and settled into the everyday life of later Japan in ways that were sometimes strange, sometimes beautiful, and often both at once. And nowhere is that shadow more peculiar, more unexpectedly cozy and absurd than in the story of a shogun who loved dogs so much that he turned the entire country into a kind of sprawling, open-air kennel, a place where a stray mutt had more rights than a human being. Picture yourself walking along a dusty road in Edo, the city that would one day become Tokyo, sometime around the year 1690. The air is thick with the smell of cedar from the wooden buildings and the faint, savory tang of soy sauce drifting from a nearby shop. You are a merchant, perhaps, or a farmer bringing vegetables to market, your feet wrapped in fresh straw sandals that you wove yourself just this morning, your fingers still remembering the automatic twist and tuck of the straw. As you walk, you hear a sound that is by now as familiar to you as your own heartbeat, the soft, rhythmic panting of a dog, the click of its nails on the hard-packed earth. You look up, and there it is. A medium-sized brown-furred creature with a curled tail and a slightly matted coat, standing squarely in the middle of the road, blocking your path. It is not a handsome dog. It is not a noble dog. It is, by any reasonable measure, a perfectly ordinary stray, the kind of animal that, in any other time or place, you might shoo away with a wave of your hand. But you do not wave your hand, you do not shoo. Instead, you stop. You take a deep breath and you step carefully to the side of the road, pressing your back against the rough wooden wall of a storehouse, and you bow. You bow low. From the waist, your eyes downcast, your hands flat against your thighs, as the dog ambles past you with the unhurried dignity of a feudal lord inspecting his domain. It does not need to. You hold your bow until the sound of its nails fades into the distance, and only then do you straighten up, adjust the bundle on your back, and continue on your way, your heart beating just a little faster than before. Because you know, as everyone knows, that the shogun loves dogs. And the shogun's love is not a gentle, abstract affection. It is law, carved into edicts and enforced with a severity that makes the rules about kimono colors and hair ribbons seem like gentle suggestions. The man behind this was Tokugawa Tsunayoshi, born in the year of the dog, and so convinced of a deep, karmic connection to all canine life that he issued a series of animal protection edicts so strict, so all-encompassing, that they would come to define his reign. He became known with a mixture of awe and exasperation as the dog shogun. And under his rule, the line between human and animal blurred in the most extraordinary way. Killing a dog even accidentally, even a dog that had been snarling and snapping at your heels, could result in your own execution. Not a fine, not a flogging, but death. The life of a stray was, in the eyes of the law, equal to the life of a person, and sometimes it seemed to weigh even heavier. The city of Edo, already one of the largest urban centers in the world, became a sanctuary for tens of thousands of dogs. They roamed the streets in packs, sleeping in the middle of bridges, nosing through market stalls, their bellies full, and their coats growing thick and glossy on a diet of rice and fish paid for by public taxes. The government built vast kennels on the outskirts of the city, sprawling complexes that covered acres of land, and if you were to walk past one on a warm afternoon, you would be enveloped by a symphony of sound. The low, rumbling chorus of hundreds of dogs, barking and yipping and whining, a constant, thrumming backdrop to life that was as much a part of the city's soundscape as the calls of street vendors or the tolling of temple bells. You could smell the kennels long before you saw them, a rich, earthy odor of wet fur and boiled rice, and the sweet, slightly sour scent of too many animals living closely together, a smell that was not entirely unpleasant, but was certainly unforgettable. A warm, living blanket of scent that settled over the neighborhood. And the dogs themselves, of course, knew nothing of the laws that protected them. They simply lived, as dogs do in the moment. A stray might decide to take a nap in the doorway of a prosperous merchant's shop, and the merchant would have to step over it, carefully, apologetically, perhaps even leaving a small offering of a rice ball to ensure the creature's continued goodwill. If a dog wandered into a tea house, the patrons would shift their cushions to make room, and the host would prepare a small bowl of water, setting it down with the same precise, graceful movements used for the most honored guest. You would see samurai, those fierce warriors, with their two swords and their strict codes of honor, bowing deeply to a scruffy, one-eared mongrel that had decided to relieve itself against a gatepost. The whole situation was, from a certain angle, deeply, profoundly absurd, a gentle, bureaucratic madness that had settled over the land like a warm, slightly smelly fog. But there was also, beneath the absurdity, a kind of tenderness, a recognition that even the smallest, most unremarkable creature deserved care. The shogun's edicts, for all their extremity, planted a seed of compassion that would, in quieter ways, outlast his dynasty. The long shadow of those laws taught people to look at a stray dog and see not a nuisance, but a being worthy of respect, a lesson that would echo down through the centuries in the way Japan would come to treat its animals, with a gentleness that still feels, to this day, like a faint, lingering memory of bowing to a mutt on a dusty road. Now, let that image soften and fade, like a reflection in a pond disturbed by a single drop of water, and let your mind drift to a different kind of shadow, one that is quieter, more delicate, and infinitely more lasting. Because while the dog shogun's edicts eventually relaxed and the kennels fell silent, other medieval practices did not simply survive. They transformed, shedding their rigid, life or death rules, and becoming something else entirely. Something that would travel across oceans and centuries to find you right now, in your own life. Think of the tea ceremony. You remember, from an earlier part of this long, drowsy story, the tiny door you had to crawl through, the exact, prescribed turn of the bowl, the way a single gathering could feel like a test of your very soul. That world of powdered green tea and whispered poetry was, in its medieval form, a high-stakes arena of social performance, a place where a misplaced gesture could ruin you. But the shadow it cast was not one of fear. It was a shadow of profound stillness. The rules, over time, softened. The rigid etiquette did not disappear, but it became a framework for something deeper, a meditation on simplicity, on the beauty of an imperfect clay bowl, on the sound of water boiling in an iron kettle, a sound that the old tea masters likened to the wind in the pines. And that practice, born in the candlelit rooms of medieval Kyoto, would one day be practiced in cities around the world. In a quiet apartment in New York, a student carefully whisks matcha into a froth, her movements slow and deliberate, her mind, for a few precious minutes, entirely focused on the green, grassy scent and the warmth of the bowl in her hands. In a community center in Berlin, a group gathers to share a bowl of tea, the ritual stripped of its old social hierarchies, but still holding, at its core, the same invitation to be present, to notice the way the light falls on the bamboo whisk, to taste the bitterness and the sweetness in a single sip. The tea ceremony you learn to survive a social gathering has become, for countless people who have never set foot in Japan, a gentle anchor in a frantic world, a living, breathing echo of a medieval rule that was, in the end, not really about the rule at all, but about the quiet space the rule created. And then there is the sumo ring. You can almost feel the packed clay under your feet, cool and slightly gritty, and hear the heavy, rhythmic stomp of a wrestler's bare foot as he lifts his leg high and brings it down with a resounding thud that vibrates up through your bones. That stomp, you might recall, was meant to squash any lurking demons, to purify the sacred space before the clash of bodies began. The referee, a samurai with a razor-sharp dagger tucked into his belt, stood ready to take his own life if he made a wrong call. A stark reminder that even in sport, the stakes were, once, impossibly high. But the long shadow of that ritual has stretched all the way into the bright, televised stadiums of today. The sumo wrestlers' stomp to squash demons is still performed, though the referee no longer carries a dagger for a wrong call. The salt still flies in glittering arcs, the wrestlers still rinse their mouths with sacred water, and the ancient, guttural cries of the referee still echo through the arena. A direct, unbroken line of sound connecting the medieval world to the modern one. The demons, it seems, still need squashing, even if the consequences for a human mistake have, thankfully, softened into a quiet word behind the scenes. And so, as you lie here, drifting on the edge of sleep, you can see how the long shadow of medieval Japan is not a dark, ominous thing, but a soft, dappled light that still plays across the world. Behind the shoguns and their edicts, behind the tea masters and the sumo wrestlers, behind all the rigid, impossible rules, were people doing what humans have always done. Trying to make sense of their world, trying to find a little beauty, a little order, a little tenderness, even in the strangest of places. They bowed to dogs, they found peace in a bowl of tea, they stomped their feet to scare away the darkness, and in doing so, they left a trail of quiet, persistent echoes that have outlasted their swords and their castles and their carefully woven sandals. So tonight, as you settle into your warm bed with soft blankets, let those echoes be the last thing you hear. The distant, rhythmic panting of a well-fed stray, the gentle whisk of bamboo against ceramic, the soft, earthy thud of a bare foot on clay. They are the sounds of a world that was, and in some small quiet way, still is. Close your eyes and drift off. Good night.